Well, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Once again, another still worth it video, and this is actually going to be covering, I think, the first iPad I ever owned as a main device. And it's actually at one point, this specific review, the iPad mini 2, back I think in like 2016, it was one of the first iPads that I reviewed, and it was one of my most popular videos at the time. I think it had like 100,000 views within like a 4-month period, and that was actually my top performing video, which is so crazy to think, so I figured I might as well go back, talk about the iPad mini 2 once again and see how it still holds up in 2020, seeing the changes with it, seeing if it's still worth it, all that good stuff. Now there's definitely some interesting things with it, but also there's some weird things with it too, so I'll kind of just brush up a little bit on both of them while I talk about it. Now this thing was released in 2013, so it will be turning 7 years old this year. It's about 6.5 at this point, but by the October timeframe it'll be about 7 years old. And looking at the front, I mean, the design hasn't really changed too much in the mini lineup. Of course, if you go to the Pro lineup, it's changed drastically, but with the iPad mini 5, it's pretty much the same exact design as this one. You have that 7.9-inch IPS panel at the front. That resolution is 1536 by 2048. It is a Retina panel, and it's definitely way better than the iPad mini 1 panel that I talked about already just like a week or two ago, and it's a good panel overall. It still seems to be like a little gap between the glass and the LCD, so it's not the most premium looking thing anymore, but the resolution is good. It's just that little bit of gap between the panel and the air. That's one thing that definitely is a little bit weird with it, but it's really not that big of a deal. You do have quite a bit of bezel on the top and bottom, which is one thing that a lot of people might not like, but like I said, it uses the same type of design as the iPad mini 5, so it's really not that big of a deal. You have that home button on the front as well, but there is no Touch ID, there's no Apple Pencil support, there's no nothing like that, so you only have the home button right there, which, give or take, some people might like it, some people might not. But with iOS 12 and all that, it kind of added the gesture support, which is really cool, which I do like a lot. On the bottom, a lightning port with the headphone jack, and on the back, just a single camera setup and that aluminum build, and that's really pretty much it on the outside. No IP certification, no nothing like that. In terms of the design, some people might hate it, some people might not like it, but it really hasn't aged too much. Like I said, if the iPad mini 5 brought a whole new design, then I would kind of be, hesitant on recommending this based off the design, but it's really not that big of a deal, and I think a lot of people probably won't care about the design. There's a lot of other things to care about and reasons not to pick this thing up rather than just the design. But the design wise and feeling it in the hand, it still pretty much holds up in 2020, which is something that I really do like. So that really pretty much covers it up in terms of the outside. Now hitting on the iOS version and software in general, this thing started off with iOS 7. We are able to upgrade it to iOS 12. There's I don't know why these specs that I keep reading off these things are so bad, because it's telling me that it got iPadOS 13, but it did not. No A7 chip device got iPadOS 13. But what I can tell you about the software is that, I think iOS 12 was a decent spot for a lot of these iPads and older phones to end off. And the reason being is because iPadOS 13 and iOS 13 were kind of a little bit of changing. There's definitely some weird things wrong with it. Of course, with iOS 13, it seems to be a lot more issues with it than iPadOS 13. In my opinion, even with iOS 11, I always saw that whenever there was a bad version of iOS on a phone, usually the iPads were pretty decent at keeping up. There weren't really any crazy issues with the iPads that I was running with, especially with iOS 11. And now with iOS 13, whenever I would run, my iPad Pro on iOS 13 or anything, I don't really have too many issues, whereas on my iPhone 11 Pro, I do have a lot of issues. And so the reason I bring that up is because with iOS 12, on my iPhone and on my iPads, it was a very good experience. So it was great on both devices, which is really good. And so that kind of makes me happy that this thing ended off with iOS 12, and it wasn't like a huge crazy update. It didn't bring like crazy humongous features, but it brought stability. And with the iPad mini 2, it's not the fastest thing in the world, it's not the smoothest thing in the world, so whenever we can get a decent performing and decent stability OS version, that's something I really like. And even with iOS 13, yeah, we got dark mode, yeah, we got a couple more things here and there, but I do think stability is more important than features at the end of the day. But what I will tell you is, and one of the most important, coolest things about the iPad mini 2 is that you are able to jailbreak your device on any version of software with that checkra1n jailbreak. That is one of the most important things ever, and I love seeing that. Honestly, like, that's one of the best things about getting an older device nowadays, is that checkra jailbreak. Just a couple months ago, we didn't even know about it. We couldn't even, I mean, we knew about it, but it wasn't available to the public yet, and now it is. And the iPad mini 2 is compatible with it. So basically, whether you're on iOS 7, you're on iOS 13, you're on iOS whatever version on your iPad mini 2, you can easily go and jailbreak this thing. And that's one of the best things about this iPad. So you can easily go and get way more features on this thing than a brand new iPad mini 5 or iPad Pro or whatever the case is, and that's something that not a lot of devices have nowadays. So I don't think the iPad mini 5 is supported. I don't think the iPad Pros are supported either, the newer 2018 ones. So say what you will, but the iPad mini 2 definitely has some really cool features up there with that checkra jailbreak. So that pretty much covers it up in terms of the software. Now, hitting on the performance, this thing was released with the Apple A7 chip, a dual-core CPU, and all the models, there was a 16, 32, 64, and 128 gigabyte model. All those models had 1 gigabyte of RAM. And what I can tell you about the performance is that, honestly, at the end of the day, it's a pretty decent performing iPad. You know, it's not the best performing iPad at all. I don't even think it's a decent performing iPad, okay, of this day and age, I'll be honest. But when you factor in the age and the price of this device, I kind of have to give it the benefit of the doubt a little bit here and there. And honestly, like, it's pretty much just an iPhone 5S, but just ported over into an iPad. It has the same amount of RAM, same chipset, same pretty much everything around the way. And I think the iPad mini 2 definitely is okay. I mean, the way I break it down is, like, if you're a student, usually students have, you know, like, if you're a student who just takes notes, I guess this is okay. I mean, I tried taking notes with it when I was a student back in the day, and honestly, like, I didn't really, like, notice that big of it. Like, I just wanted an excuse to use it. I had a MacBook, but I already spent like a couple $100 on it, so I was like, I need to use it for something. And it's okay, like, when you're taking notes, especially on iOS 12, you can download like Google Sheets, Google Docs, all those things, and like write out notes. Even the Notes app is pretty decent on it. But at the end of the day, it's just like, it's just not that smooth of an experience. I think when you're like typing things out and you're switching from one app to the other, it's just a very choppy performance all around the way, which is one thing that I really don't like about it. With something like with 2 gigabytes of RAM like the iPad Air 2, that definitely is a better performing device overall. But this one, I don't know, it just doesn't really feel right when I'm using it. If I'm like a heavier intensive student, like if I'm using like multiple apps back and forth, I'm trying to do split screen multitasking and having the notes on one side and the other thing on the other side, like, it'll help. It'll probably be okay, but even then, like, it's still not that best. It's still not that good of an experience, in my opinion. So you're better off kind of, you know, just spending a little bit more money getting an iPad Pro 10.5 inch or getting an iPad Air 2 at the end of the day. If you're just getting something based off just media consumption, then I guess it's okay. You can watch videos on this and everything. It's still kind of a slow experience though. If you're someone who wants to go and like do super heavy intensive games and all that, then this is probably not the best tablet to go with either. Like I said, an iPad Pro 10.5 inch, even an iPad Air 2 might do you better in the long run than this one. So that kind of covers that up in terms of performance. There's really not too much else to hit on here. It is an older device, so I have to give it the benefit of the doubt here and there. So I think that pretty much covers it up in terms of that. Now, hitting on the camera, this thing has a 5 megapixel back-facing camera and a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera. And with that front camera, you can do 720p at 30 frames, which is cool. On that back camera, 1080p at up to 30 frames, and no 4K videos on this thing, no nothing like that. It's a very simplistic, very basic camera. It gets the job done at the most part, but if you're trying to go and take family photos on this thing and all that, I probably wouldn't recommend it. It's a very basic camera, no ultra wide sensors, no telephoto lenses, no night mode, no portrait mode, no nothing like that. But like I said, I guess if you have a camera, it's really just made for FaceTime. If you're getting a FaceTime call, it's really cool that you have the convenience of picking it up on an iPad. You know, if you need to go, if you don't have your phone with you, if you left your iPad on like your dinner table and you just have it there, I guess it's more of a convenience feature rather than you actually using it. I would still probably use my iPhone 11 Pro's camera for anything ever than an iPad's camera at any point. So that pretty much covers it up in terms of the camera sensors. Now, ending it off with the battery life. This thing has a non-removable 6,470 milliamp-hour battery, and what's really cool about these batteries on these iPads is they're usually really big for their sizes. So with the iPad Pro 10.5 inch had a pretty big battery, iPad Air 1 and Air 2 had pretty big batteries as well, and that's one thing that I really do love about the iPads. Apple just puts such big batteries in them, and that's one humongous thing. You know, even if the battery has degraded on these iPads, which they have 100%, these batteries are not at the full, 6,000 or whatever milliamp hours. They're probably at like they're probably at like 40, 500 or something like that. And even with that, it's still a pretty decent sized battery, you know, and I'm already expecting it to not last a full day on me, but sometimes it will. And standby time is really great. I don't use these iPads like crazy anymore, but they last a pretty decent long time. And that's something that I really do love about these iPads, and these older ones especially. Of course, the newer ones have, you know, really decent battery life too, but the iPad mini 2s, the iPad Airs, these have pretty decent battery sizes for their size of the tablet and for the performance. The iPad mini 2 isn't a crazy performing device. It's not like it has like 100 gigabytes of RAM and 8-core CPU and all that. Like, it's just a dual-core CPU device. Like, the A7 chip didn't really suck up a lot of battery at the end of the day. So to kind of sum up this whole entire video and to answer the question, is the iPad mini 2 still worth it in 2020? I will say, like, it probably has like another like couple months or maybe up to a year of life out of it. I wouldn't really recommend people buying it to use as a main device. Like, it's pretty slow for that standard. I would at least go for an iPad mini 4 if you're going to do it. My favorite tablet to recommend though to people is probably that iPad Air 2 or that iPad Pro 10.5 inch. The 10.5 inch iPad Pro more so than the iPad Air 2, but the iPad mini 2 is okay. Like, it's probably like a 5 out of 10 right now, but that iPad Pro 10.5 inch is probably like an 8 out of 10 or even like a 9 out of 10 still. That device is a killer device still. You have that 120 Hz refresh rate, Apple Pencil support, very fast device. Like, there's really not too much to hate on it, and that device has a lot more going for it than you might think. So iPad mini 2 is okay, I guess, if you can get it for a good price, or if it's your only device, then use it. But if you can spend a little bit more money, I would recommend getting an iPad Pro 10.5 inch or even an iPad Air 2 if you want to go a little bit lower than that. But I'll find the cheapest ones of those tablets and I'll link them down in the description so you guys can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section as well. Hit that like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those things are linked down below. I'd really appreciate it if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.